Yeah, thank you very much. I think you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, you can see, I hope, my screen here. So, yeah, my name is Juhar Yasin ABAMOSA, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Bergen. And today I'm going to present part of my PhD project. It's not the total, but this is only focusing on the roles of universities. But my entire project is focusing on the roles of different institutions, not only academic institutions or higher education institutions, but other institutions roles in facilitating or hindering, actually, social inclusion of refugees into higher education. And I also thank the coordinators for inviting me to this presentation or webinar. My topic is actually how social inclusive are our universities to refugees, policies and the practice of the universities in Norway. I could have formulated this topic in a more general way, but I want my participants to engage themselves with this presentation because in one way or another, we are really related to higher education institutions. So I want you to reflect on your own institutions, whether they are facilitating or hindering participation of refugees into higher education. Host countries have stressed very recently the importance of effective integration of refugees with the main focus on participation in the labor market. By doing so, they are really marginalizing, whether it is consciously or otherwise, refugee higher education. Higher education institutions can play positive roles in mainstreaming refugee higher education. So against this backdrop, I want to address two questions. The first one is, what concrete measures do universities take or lack thereof to facilitate social inclusion of refugees into higher education in Norway? So this lack thereof is really not to facilitate, but to hinder social inclusion of refugees, if there are some initiatives which are lacking. How can these measures be interpreted through social inclusion theory? So I don't think it is necessary to define what the term refugees are, but in Norway, we consider refugees as those, or the listed type of people can have the same rights and obligations as refugees, particularly when it comes to higher education, education and participation in the labor market, So it is really not necessary to define here, but for more information on refugees in Norway, we can visit the Immigration Directorate's website. It is listed there. Previous studies on the roles of higher education institutions. Generally speaking, the existing literature on refugee higher education is scant, but the research is really emerging. The existing literature, I have tried to go through some from Germany, France, Belgium, and Austria. And I have summarized some of the roles played by higher education institutions, which include assisting refugees on the admission process, developing adapted admission processes, providing information on study programs existing in the institutions actually, recognition of prior learning or qualifications, providing language courses, waiving of tuition fees, preparatory academic programs and bridging courses, peer and academic mentoring, psychological support to refugees. All these initiatives are very interesting, very good, but what does each one of these initiatives indicate is the question that I'm going to ask, later on, because except for peer mentoring and academic mentoring, all the others are the narrowest dimension of social inclusion, as far as social inclusion theory, which I'm going to use, is concerned. These are really not so much strategic in a way. They are more of ad hoc or very short or the narrowest way of representing social inclusion. How so? We are going to see. So I'm using the total theoretical framework adapted from social inclusion theory developed by Gidley from Australia. Here. Sorry. So social inclusion in general can refer to break down barriers that prevent full participation of immigrants or refugees in their host countries. And in this study, I do see social inclusion from 3 dimensions. The narrow access dimension, little bit wider participation, and the most comprehensive dimension, which is empowerment actually. So when we say access, these are neoliberal principle-driven initiatives which focus on human capital for economic competition. So they are less concerned with social justice in a way. So these are most of the initiatives that I have mentioned here, they do belong here in the first dimension, actually, access. So you can see in the circle, access is really the narrow part of the social inclusion dimension. And then we come to participation. This is much better. I may not take position, but it is much better because it is concerned with social justice issues with the aim of equity and fairness for all. And the third one is empowerment, which is actually advanced. And it is about human potential principles with the goal of empowering people to realize their potential by addressing issues of power and dominant cultural issues in host countries. Methodology, I have employed qualitative exploratory research design here. 2 public universities were selected purposefully. And I conducted semi-structured face-to-face interview with 2 experts at universities. The average length was 109 minutes. And I have also used document analysis. Thematic analysis of the data sets following the procedures developed by Brown and Clark was used to analyze the data. So this the box indicates the document is considered for analysis. So most of these documents were, up to 2022. So it's really not that much strategic in a way, not long-term policies. But I have used this from 2 universities, University of Oslo and the University of Bergen. My findings, I have categorized them very briefly into facilitators and constraints. The facilitators were the Norwegian language courses for refugees, particularly at University of Bergen. We have a long tradition of providing refugees free of cost language courses in Norway, which is really very important because in some places, people should pay huge amount of money in Norway to learn Norwegian, but our education is free of tuition fee. So it's a kind of paradox here. University of Oslo, they do have also certain courses for refugees when it comes to Norwegian language, but it is not as advanced or developed as it is at University of Bergen. Academic Dugnad, as Merit mentioned before, it is University of Oslo's initiative, but gradually encompassed by many higher education institutions in Norway. That is also very good, even though most of its activities have phased out now. And the cooperation with other organizations, this one also Merit has touched upon it. And it is very important here to see the cooperation one, because it belongs to the participation section of or dimension of social inclusion. The other 2 are within the access dimension. Constraints, what I would love to see, but couldn't find in the data where there's of refugee social inclusion policy in strategic plans at institutional level. So I considered those documents, but I couldn't find anywhere which explicitly talks about refugee higher education in Norway, with the exception of some elements of internationalization issues related to immigrants and refugees, particularly at University of Bergen. Lack of bridging programs for refugees. There is no special programs for refugees at both universities. Refugees as invisible group of students. It is illegal in Norway to register students based on their immigration background. So that is also, I think, disadvantageous in a way, because we cannot prepare or create initiatives, particularly for focusing on refugees, if we don't know who refugees are really. Lack of English language courses for refugees, because English language is considered to be one of the main constraints to get access and also eventually success in higher education. So, but there is lack of provision of English language at the universities. My discussion. Most of the efforts are mostly ad hoc. They are temporary actually, in the sense that they remain marginal activities of the universities or have been discontinued since. The absence of refugee social inclusion policy at institutional level can be an indication of how non-systemic social inclusion of refugees in higher education is at both universities. The universities do not have a complete approach even to the narrowest dimension, I mean the access dimension. For example, absence of bridging or preparatory programs indicates that even the narrowest dimension of social inclusion is not taken seriously. Few good experiences at the universities may constitute social inclusion to some extent. For example, offering the Norwegian language courses to refugees is a good indication in this case. Similarly, peer mentoring programs and the cooperation of universities with other organizations can be considered as a participation dimension of social inclusion. These are, but not enough, to be honest here. My conclusion, Norwegian language course, academic dugnad, and cooperating with different organizations are the main measures the universities have taken in relation to refugees in general, and that of higher education in particular, with the exception of provision of the Norwegian language training, which falls under the access dimension of social inclusion. Other measures the universities have taken in relation to refugees have phased out or are not strategic in nature. This indicates that the universities could have done much more in realizing the social inclusion of refugees by focusing on access, participation, and empowerment principles in a comprehensive way. And my recommendations are to the universities. Refugee social inclusion policy at institutional level should be devised, opening dedicated centers with durable initiatives and activities such as bridging programs, incorporating language courses, participatory decision-making on issues concerning refugees, cultural days, acculturation programs should be really initiated on campuses. And to the government and the state, which is really the main fund provider to the institutions, the states could include social inclusion discourse in integration and higher education policies at national level so that the institutions can be working within those frameworks. Fund the universities to realize the access, participation, and empowerment of refugees in suitable ways. And I thank you very much for your attention. So for the questions, I'll come after my presentation or at the time, yeah.
Thank you very much. Some really interesting points made there and some interesting issues for discussion later on.